It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
So Elliott Heads has always been a very sleepy coastal township, and it's got so much developable land out towards a beautiful little primary school out there. Bargara is a little more landlocked, I must admit. So a lot of that growth, as you touched on, is between Bargara and Elliott Heads. There's some out towards Moore Park as well, which is on our northernmost tip of our sort of part of this coastline.
And that is Brent Illingworth there in Bundaberg. We'll get back to Brent in just a moment. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, your knowledge-based property podcast, here 7 days a week from all corners of the Australian housing market. It is a Thursday, July the 3rd, and got to talk about this great piece of reporting yesterday, the day before maybe, from Domain about Diana, a domestic violence survivor and single mum battling serious health issues. She is about to defy the odds, and it's thanks to a new pilot program called Little Green Houses for Her. Diana will become a homeowner, something that she thought never possible. Now, the scheme was created by Global Sisters and Wild Modular and Regional Australia Bank. Now, what they're doing is they're offering small, energy-efficient homes on low-interest loans. If successful in New South Wales and Victoria, it could expand nationally, changing the lives for vulnerable women across Australia. And if you've been listening to the podcast for some time, you know that I am definitely in the corner for these vulnerable women, particularly a lot of them that come out of marriages and they just don't have enough money to get back into the housing market. So we're going to bring you more on that story in the next coming week. But right now, let's get back to that conversation with Brent Illingworth in Bundaberg in Queensland. And good morning. Welcome back, Brent. We were talking to you about a year ago there in Bundaberg. And that story, you know, such a great story about these women, very vulnerable. And in that particular case, Diana, a very positive outcome.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, thank you very much for having me back on the podcast. It's great to be here and have a bit of a chinwag about how Bundaberg fits into the puzzle. But certainly talking about someone like Diana, it's an inspiring story and something that is pretty close to home up here in Bundaberg, as we're such an affordable part of Australia. So we do see a lot of people hitting the reset button and often coming from times of hardship, and they want to come to a new part of the world and give themselves an opportunity to get back in and get back on board with saving for a house or getting into a house immediately. And we do provide a nice platform for that, given our median house price.
Yeah, I was talking to Eliza Owen yesterday, talking about the regional markets. They are still outpacing capital cities, but growth momentum is shifting or starting to shift back to the major cities. You're in one of those locations where first home buyers, I remember last time we spoke, plenty of interest from those first home buyers. So what's been happening since we last spoke?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been much more of the same, to be honest with you. The positivity that I spoke about 12 months ago, and I probably mentioned it then as well, that we do expect some stage that it must come back a touch or slow down a touch, but it continues to soldier on at this point in time. And it's a pure supply and demand thing in a place like Bundaberg at the moment, I must admit. We just don't have the houses, and that leads into that affordability issue that we're having at the moment across Australia, particularly in the capital cities. We are seeing a lot of first home buyer types and even investors trying to get into the market, and they're looking at places like Bundaberg where your median house price is tracking towards 600,000 across the LGA. And when you look at Bundaberg, that's still affordable. If you go any further south than us, I mean, Fraser Coast, Hervey Bay, Maryborough, etc., are more expensive, and certainly anywhere south of Gympie into that southeast corner is very expensive. From our perspective, the numbers are still really, really strong. We're seeing great growth quarter on quarter, year on year. So we've just closed out another record financial year just for our little business, our little slice of the pie here in Bundaberg. And it's great to see. And speaking to a lot of my colleagues, it seems to be that way across the board. And I was in Brisbane a couple of weeks ago, and it's just amazing talking to people about real estate, even in Brisbane, and they turn around and say, hey, we're looking at Bundaberg at the moment. We're investing in Bundabergs. Seems to be a bit of a buzzword at the minute.
Yeah, because the Bundaberg 24-25 financial year, now that did close with plenty of demand for those homes between 500 and 700k range. And the last RBA rate cut, I think that really boosted a lot of regional areas. You would have noticed how that just sort of pulled the trigger for a lot of people, investors as well, to say, yeah, Bundaberg is looking pretty good, as you say. It's a little cheaper than Hervey Bay, and people have been gravitating ever since.
Yeah, there's been no slowdown of that pretty much post-COVID. You talk about the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen year-on-year growth. And each year, if you expect it to abode a little bit downwards, it certainly goes the other way again. And we've seen approximately 13% growth across most suburbs in Bundaberg again this year. And from my perspective, it seems to be more of that on the forecast for the next 6 months into 2026. You talk about the affordability between 500 and 750k. I think that's because we're in that sweet spot. As I said earlier, our median house price still hasn't edged over 600,000 yet for our region. So that does make us affordable, particularly if you're living in a suburb or an area of Australia which is well up towards that $1 million mark, which they're so common now. Once upon a time, being a millionaire was just such a sought after thing and a big thing. And now you've almost got to have $1 million just to get into the market somewhere down south. From our perspective, it makes it easy for us to market. We know where we live is fantastic and it's a very attractive part of the world. But as far as getting that secret out to other people, it's been on the tip of the tongue for a lot of investors over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. Again, as they sort of double down, as you say, with interest rates coming back a fraction, that took some pressure off. Our local level, it's still continued to go up and the forecasts are great. So we're looking forward to the next 12 months as well.
Yeah, I think there's something in the psychology. If it is under $600,000 for investors alike too, they find that very, very appealing. Now, talking of appealing, Bundaberg's Regional Council, I think pretty proactive mayor that you've got there, approved nearly 5,000 new housing lots along the Wide Bay coastline. Now, this is stretching from Elliott Heads to Bargara. So tell us a little bit about this because you'll be right across it, won't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's super exciting. Our coastline has been relatively underdeveloped for a long, long time. And I suppose that was part of its charm, particularly to locals. You could whip out there and drop a line just about anywhere and have a fish and you wouldn't even interrupt anyone. You'd barely see anyone. But that leads into the fact that there was clearly a lot of underutilised land. And when you talk about affordability and coming this far north of Brisbane, it's getting more attainable to get down to Brisbane and back for a day trip. So driving from Bundaberg to Brisbane now is 3.5 hours approximately, thanks to that Gympie bypass. So our mayor's tried to capitalise on that and free up some land. So when people do travel in this direction or locals want to invest in this direction, we certainly can look out to our coastline and see that there's a lot more land available. That particular stretch was dominated by sugarcane once upon a time, and our agriculture industries have diversified over the years to sweet potatoes, to macadamias and all those sorts of things. But ultimately, what's driving our region right now is that population growth, and we need somewhere for people to be able to build their homes. So Elliott Heads has always been a very sleepy coastal township, and it's got so much developable land out towards a beautiful little primary school out there. Bargara is a little more landlocked, I must admit. So a lot of that growth, as you touched on, is between Bargara and Elliott Heads. There's some out towards Moore Park as well, which is on our northernmost tip of our sort of part of this coastline. But particularly that Innes Park, Coral Cove, Elliott Heads, those areas are places that people will start to know as common household names. It's pretty much been Bargara dominating that side of things over the years, but I think those other 3 suburbs I've just touched on with the growth they've got planned and our Mayor, Helen Blackburn, being so proactive with opening up some of that land for development, it's only boding well for further growth in our region.
We are talking to Brent there in Bundaberg on our Thursday morning. When we come back, I want to talk about the mortgage arrears in a place like Bundaberg and what is observed. We'll talk about that next.
Eager to expand your property expertise? Enhance your real estate know-how with us.
When you decided to turn a tiny old workers' cottage in Sydney's Newtown into a fully off-grid home, almost as I understand it, every tradie that you spoke to said, oh, you're dreaming. Almost sounds like the castle. So talk to that and the fact that you did finally find a builder and an architect.
So the goal was to be as sustainable as possible on a very small block because most of us live in the city on very small blocks and we also don't have, millions and millions of dollars to, build huge houses in Byron Bay that are sustainable. The whole goal was to try and see how sustainable I could be on the smallest and worst possible block possible. Yeah, only 104 square metres, and, every architect and engineer and tradie that I spoke to, essentially told me that what I was trying to do was too difficult, going off grid for the sewer, so not connecting my toilet to the sewer and using my own water, and then going off grid for electricity. They just said the space was too small.
Decode the property market with insider knowledge and insights to better navigate your real estate journey.
And it is a Real Estate Thursday. We are in Queensland talking to Brent there in Bundaberg. Yesterday, talking with Eliza from CoreLogic, I did talk about the mortgage arrears in Australia. They have edged up slightly to 1.68%, but remain historically low. And that was under all the pressure that we have had post-COVID. Even the highly leveraged borrowers are trending better, showing that resilience despite cost of living pressures. What in that space has been unfolding with Bundaberg?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And obviously, I've only got a very small snapshot of the overall landscape of mortgages across Australia. But Bundaberg, typically speaking, was a lower socioeconomic area and probably still is in the grand scheme of things. But with the infrastructure we've put in place recently and the people that are moving here from more affluent areas, it is changing fractionally. I must admit, as a leading agent in the area, I do get to work with a number of mortgagee in possession companies and things like that. And it's never a nice situation to know that someone has fallen into arrears to that extent. But the reality of it is, there's ways and means, and they're lessering, which is really good at the moment. From my perspective, I see less of them all the time. That is, I probably deal with them once every few months now, whereas once upon a time they were a big part of our every year sales turnover. So now they're not, which is an exciting indication that I think people are. You mentioned the word resilience. I think they're aware of the fact that life is very, very expensive, and the rug can be pulled out from underneath you pretty quickly with something like a global pandemic in regards to, say, COVID. And people knew they had to batten down the hatches and save at that particular time because job security was an issue. And that's a habit I hope to think that Aussies have now sort of imbued in themselves, and it's going to be something ongoing from here on out because our part of the world is gorgeous. We love living here. That's Bundaberg. That's wherever else in Australia we might be.
Now, we talk a lot about these cities where, somebody perhaps in Brisbane decides to move out of Brisbane, go into Bundaberg. Now, I can see that this particular development may very well have a number of people in these cities that want to cash up, want to put some money in the bank and purchase.
100%. So we've always been appealing for that. Even our coastal strip has always been appealing for that because of the affordability factor. I must admit, we're not immune to the costs of living these days as far as building goes and as far as costs of shopping and those sorts of things. That's still a real issue in Bundaberg and right across our economy Australia-wide. But our affordability factor is still super appealing. When you look at the median house price in Brisbane and places like that, most of your suburbs are comfortably over a seven-figure sum now. So when you're looking at that, particularly as far as metropolitan areas go, close to that city, close to that river, so they come to Bundaberg for a lifestyle that they perhaps are missing a little bit too. The riverside suburbs in Brisbane are just so hectic now. Once upon a time, they weren't quite that busy. So when they look for somewhere that's got that same idyllic winding river, the nice little open fields and plenty of options for work, well, that's Bundaberg now. We've got that, and we've got the facilities. We've got so much development going on, a new hospital going in. So all these sorts of things tick the boxes that people perhaps once hesitated about leaving the rat race, the big cities, to come to a region. We've now got those things, which is really exciting for not just the next 12 months and financial year, but the next 10 years, the next 20 years. It's all exciting for our part of the world.
All right, Brent, we'll wrap it up there. Good to get the update out of Bundaberg this morning, and all things are seeming to be pretty positive. So thanks again for jumping on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning, and enjoy your Thursday.
Thank you, mate. Always a pleasure. Love talking to you.
It's the Real Estate Podcast, talking properties from 6 a.m. every day from every corner of the Australian real estate market.
Got to ask you about the RBA meeting, which isn't too far away. We've had some of this shenanigans, shall we say, from Trump. But what are you guys expecting to take place with this meeting?
Yeah, so despite some of the uncertainties internationally, you've had a big question mark around oil prices recently, it seems that most major banks and data flows are showing that we are ready for more rate cuts. This was pretty pronounced from the monthly CPI data, which came out last week. So that basically firmed up this idea that, okay, inflation is still continuing to come down. We're probably good to cut again.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.